I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending March the 29th. We are now in a bear market on your fat cattle anyway, and it arrived a little bit quicker than what we thought. We thought we could keep gaining before we started going back down the hill for a few more weeks, but I'll tell you what, your Southern Plains cattle feeders, your Kansas negotiated sellers sealed that deal when they caved in on Wednesday morning at a $3 lower market here after all the bullish fundamental factors we've had all winter long here. But we are definitely in a bear market on your fat cattle trade now, and now everybody's just going to wait and see how far down it goes and how fast it goes. But guys are going to have to kind of try to hold things together a little bit and hold for some steady weeks here and there on the way back down the hill to try to just maintain as much market position as they can. But let's look at the board for this week, for this past week. April live cattle futures Monday was down $2.15. Now that Monday was after a fairly bearish cattle on feed report, especially on your placements. But I think it was more than that. It was some technical things going on in there, and I'm not going to blame all the loss on the cattle on feed report. Tuesday was down 67 cents, Wednesday down 65, Thursday back up 27 cents, and Friday down 82, with your April live cattle futures losing $4.02 this past week to end the week at 125.70. January live cattle contracts ended the week at 119 even, losing $4.50 for the week. April feeder cattle Monday was down 260, Tuesday up 2 cents, Wednesday down 32, Thursday was up a nickel, and Friday down 70 cents, with your April feeder cattle contracts ending the week at 145 and a quarter, and that was down 355 for the week. Your March feeder cattle went off the board this past week at 141.74. May is sitting there at 148.77, and your fall contracts have really gained a lot of ground. You remember several weeks ago we talked about when they were down under 150 that they would look a lot more realistic at 170 than they would 150, and now we've seen them rise quite a bit while we've seen the nearbys jockey around. But your fall feeder contracts are up over 158 now, and your feeder cattle prices and your contracts are going to continue to go up now through fall, because feeder cattle in general will be fairly scarce all summer long, with everybody having most of their cattle either turned out or the heavier cattle in the feedlot, and there just won't be a lot of feeder type weights moving, and then they'll just keep drying up, and then we'll have 4th of July shut down. There won't be hardly any cattle moving at all, and then your feedlots are going to be really hungry for cattle, like they always are right there at the latter part of July, whenever those double stock cattle start coming off of those pastures, and those are going to be the best doing yearlings of the year, and your feeders are going to be hungry for them. They want those cattle, they know what they'll do, and they'll get out there and battle for them in the country, and we'll see some pretty impressive prices, and we could see those gain quite a bit of ground between now and then. And that kind of goes back to the China deal too. If we see more work on the sending some protein to China, that could help. Of course, it's going to help everything, but it could help your fall feeder cattle, because they tend to want to push on those end of the year and early next year fat contracts, which is going to help your fall feeder cattle. And you can see guys are kind of have some faith in that, because they're really going after your stocker cattle right now. But your fat cattle trade for last week, 68,600, and that would be the bulk of the trade. There might be a little bit of cleanup trade on Friday, but I wouldn't say it would be much over 70,000 for the week, and that's another light week. They just continue to get by, buying fewer and fewer cattle, but almost every week this year, considerably less cattle sold in the same week a year ago. But your live fed cattle selling from 125 to 128, mostly 126 to 127 in the northern plains, which was $2 lower, and 125 to 126 in the Southern Plains, a full $3 lower. And we talked a lot about how disappointing that was on Wednesday when we saw a significant established trade all the way down at 125. Well, guys were still thinking that we may be able to hold steady or gain a buck this last week, and then to lose that much ground, and then just to know that it's sealed, that we've topped out for the spring, and that affected everything. But your dress trade, 203 to 206, but mostly 205 to 206, and you think, shoot, I'd sell them dressed. Yeah, if you could get a dressed bid. But the dressing percentages, cattle are carrying a lot of tag, a lot of mud on them, which drops their dressing percentage. All that is waste, and so the dressing percentages are so low that we're seeing those prices stay up. They gained more ground a week earlier than the live did, and they didn't drop as much this past week. They were down $2 on your dress trade, 205 to 206. But your weighted average live price, if you take you arrive at that at 206, that's just over 61% dress. That's not very good. Most of the time guys figure 62 or 2.5, and so then you would expect your live price to be a little higher, but and you don't see hardly any dress trade in the Southern Plains ever, or else they would definitely take that. But your packers want the cattle. They don't want to have to guess on those dressing percentages, and a lot of those cattle coming in under 60. But like I said, at that top dress price of 206, that's only a 61% dress for the weighted average on your live price. Your box beef cutout values were kind of mixed last week. Your average trade for the week on choice cuts is $228.20, down 75 cents compared to the weighted average from the previous week. Your selects $219.33, up 67 cents. And the end of the week was a little bit lower too than what these average prices were. But your choice select spread on your average sales was $8.87, and pretty decent movement of 565 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter, if you look at that, it was disappointing late in the week. It looked like we had a pretty good run. The week before we had over 630,000. That's a really good clip. We'd like to see more of those. We were keeping up pretty good till the later part of the week, and only ended up with 614,000. That was 17,000 fewer than the previous week, but 24,000 more than the same week a year ago. And what we're really looking at is the weights and how much they're following. So your actual slaughter information come back for March the 16th. It had average steer dressed weight at 865 pounds. That was 6 pounds lighter than just the previous report, and 12 pounds lighter than the same time a year ago. So that's pretty significant, and we should see those weights drop a lot lower, because all those cattle pulling that mud and the bitter cold temperatures and everything. So that'll be interesting to see how far that goes down, and if we can gain any kind of a support out of that. But we'll talk about what happened over the weekend. Hey, what about your Texas Tech Red Raiders? We saw a Cowboy school get into the Final Four for the first time in a long time. So that's always great. So we got to root on their Texas Tech Red Raiders. And was down in Fort Worth over the weekend at the Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association convention, and hanging out and kind of networking in the trade show expo that they had there. And I tell you what, it is about as good a one as you'll find anywhere. I go to a lot of that kind of stuff, but Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers is really a producer-driven type of an organization, and they have that convention right in there in Fort Worth, and a lot of producers can come. So you saw a lot of actual people. You go to some of these conventions and they have them at a vacation spot, and you basically just see animal health reps and stuff like that walking around, and because the producers can't afford to fly to these places and then write it off on the company, it's going to come out of their pocket. So it's nice to have a convention in a place where there's cattle people, and so that was a good deal, and saw several people that watched the feeder flash and the cattle market summary there and enjoyed talking to all of them. Going to be traveling up to Bassett, Nebraska this week. Going to go to the sale there on Wednesday, and then the next day doing a speaking engagement there in Bassett. So looking forward to getting up there and kind of seeing a little bit of what they're going through. Winter returned again. It looked like we were going to have springtime, and early in the week we had some really nice weather, and then danged if it didn't start snowing again up in that country over the weekend, and cold temperatures again. But we're getting closer. We're getting longer days now. We're just going to get a little more sunshine, and it will be here before you know it, guys. But let's look at your feeder cattle markets for last week. Your real-time index on Cattle Market Central ended the week at 139.22 for an 800-pound steer. That was down $2.38 compared to the end of the previous week. And your feeder cattle going right into the feedlot, ended the week steady to $3 lower after they started the week a little bit higher. People, the nice weather had some good cattle in the sales, and people were pretty aggressive. Some of the places, not the flooded areas up in Nebraska, but some of the places on the fringes and Kansas and places were starting to dry out a little bit, and seeing a little bit better feedlot conditions, and everybody was pretty excited to start the week out last week, despite that cattle on feed report. And that's why I don't think we can blame a whole lot of that bearishness on that cattle on feed report. But Monday and Tuesday we went kind of like that. But then Wednesday morning, when we had that Wednesday morning flop of a trade, $3 lower in the middle of the week in the morning, and just seemed like your Southern Plains cattle feeders, they had cattle on the show list. They were afraid that if they didn't take that, they weren't going to get them moved right away, and afraid that they had more fat cattle than slaughter space, frankly. But I think they got spooked a little bit on that, and you guys think I criticize the Packers all the time, which you could probably say that's true, but actually, just in talking about that, I'm just talking about how smart the Packers are in the way that they negotiate, and it's unbelievable. If I could get those guys as a group, to do all my negotiating every time I buy a new pickup, anything, I would love to have them do it, because they are so good at what they do, and just seem like they've always got the leverage on their side, even when they don't. After all of this bullish fundamental stuff we've had, it's hard to say it's bullish that we've had those horrible floods, but you lose a lot of cattle, lose a lot of weight, and it's all about tonnage on there. That should have been a big boost. And then when it did the absolute opposite, very, very bearish in moods more than anything, and I could tell that talking to people over the weekend. But cash feeders, like I said, ended the week steady to $3 lower after starting a week higher. But your stocker cattle, especially your stocker cattle and your wean calves that were ready to turn out, really selling good, firm to $5 higher. We saw a lot of outstanding prices on lighter weight cattle. We're closing in here. They turn out a lot of those cattle in those big grazing areas in the Osage and Flint Hills. A lot of people turn out April 15th, so they're getting ready for that. We saw some monster prices on some cattle that are bigger than what you normally think turnout cattle are, but especially on a double stock deal, you'll see people turn cattle out even weighing up and over 700 pounds, because it doesn't bother them for those cattle to weigh 1,000 now coming off. They're not hard to sell. Maybe years back they were hard to sell if they were that heavy, but now they don't, and that gain is so cheap, in the 40-cent range, and that there's nothing better than turning cattle out there and watching them put those cheap pounds on. But look at some sales there late in the week. Burwell, Nebraska, up there in the Sand Hills, and I tell you what, that's a top premium quality sale right there. Had a lighter run, and they had some of that wintry weather that I was talking about, but just under 1,700 head there. But you see some of those big prices come out of there, and look at this one string of 100 head of 558-pound steers, bring $206.50 in Burwell, Nebraska. That's a heck of a good price. And then on up a little further north, Magnus Livestock in Huron, South Dakota, sold 60 head of feeder steers weighing 838 at 150, 175. And that's pretty impressive. That's a look at your week's markets from a Home Debit auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.